was asked a question this past week that is worth reflecting on. How will our country react if the election is close in November? And by close, I mean no clear winner on election night. That question prompted me to add some questions of my own. What if the election comes down to a single state, which has actually happened before? What if the election comes down to a single county in a single state? What if the election comes down to a single precinct or a single box in a single county in a single state? And that led me to perhaps the most important question of all, which is, who do we collectively trust enough to count the ballots in that single precinct, in that single county, in that single state? The question I was focused on isn't who will actually conduct the count. The county involved and the state involved would already have those procedures in place. And I'm certain all of that would be overseen by the ever watchful eyes of lawyers hired by nearly every group you can possibly imagine. So the question isn't who would actually conduct the count. The question I had was broader and a little different. Who would you trust? Who would we trust to conduct that count? And at this point, it's probably worth stopping and addressing this new political trend we've been experiencing over the past several elections, that every single election, every one of them, has somehow been the single most important, consequential election in the history of our country. I mean, quite candidly, all elections have been important because you're electing the most powerful or influential. And by the way, those are two different things, but you're electing the most powerful or influential person in the world, or at least that's what we believe. The political trend is undeniable, though, that this is the most consequential election in the history of the country. I mean, they've all been important, haven't they? I mean, they all represent different views of the role of government and the direction of the country. And that is what political parties and politics is about. It's contrasting viewpoints on significant issues. So I guess it's true on one level that the next anything is the most important one. The next putt you have on the golf course is the most important putt. The next phone call you make is going to be the most important one. The next conversation you have with your children or grandchildren is the most important one because it's next. And there's always a chance it's going to be the last. So I guess it is somewhat logical to note the next election is the most important one. But we say that every time now. And it leads to this notion that if the election doesn't turn out a certain way, the entire experiment in self-governance is over. If you're a Republican, it is worth noting you survived 8 years of Bill Clinton and 8 years of Barack Obama. And you may have hated every single second of it. You may have felt the country was sliding in a direction you didn't like, but you survived. If you're a Democrat, you survived 8 years of George W. Bush. And if you're listening and alive right now, you've survived 4 years of President Trump. If you're a Democrat, let's be very clear, you would not have liked it if Ted Cruz had won or Marco Rubio or any of the other GOP candidates. You may like John Kasich now, but you didn't when he was a candidate. You may even like Mitt Romney now, but you certainly didn't like him enough to vote for him when he ran. So we are told that this is the most important election ever in the history of the English-speaking world. It's important because it's next. It's important because our country's divided. It's important because there are serious challenges, but all elections have been important, and the ones to come will be important too. I will admit this one feels a little different because the election's been ongoing since the day after the president was inaugurated. And that just feels like a trend. It feels like it's going to be that way no matter which person or which political party is inaugurated, that the next election will begin immediately. And it does admittedly feel a little bit different this cycle because of how divided we appear to be as a country. And I mean a daily dose of division. And there is still this pandemic, which is continuing to impact our lives. And then the seasonal flu is coming as well. And there's economic uncertainty. There are lots of reasons this cycle feels different. And speaking of different, I have a little different view. I think this election at all levels, House, Senate, presidential, is important because everything's on the ballot. The House is on the ballot, a third of the Senate, and probably control of the Senate, and of course the White House. But I also think this election is important because we are constantly placed on notice that it will be our reaction to this election and the consequences of it going one way or the other that will also have a profound impact on our country. Our reaction to the election, how we handle the results, that too is on the ballot in November and probably beyond. What amazes the rest of the world, I suspect, is watching the peaceful transfer or continuation of power in this country. And it is a transfer or a continuation that we have every 4 years. We fight, we vote, we inaugurate, and then we begin it all over again. That's the cycle. Long gone, I think, are the days of us saying, well, the other side won, so they get their chance to pick judges or justices or set the foreign policy. Every day now feels like election day, and the road to 2024, quite frankly, begins on Wednesday, November the 4th of 2020, the day after the election. The road to 2024 will begin to be paved. It's one thing to begin preparing for the next political battle. It is quite another to litigate the results of the last election and to do so continuously. But I digress. Back to my question. What if the election comes down to a single precinct in a single county in a single state? That therein lies the balance of executive power for the next 4 years. So I want you to do something with me. I want you to use your imagination. I want you to close your eyes unless you're driving or walking. Imagine with me that there's a box. It's an old wooden box like we used to use in the courtroom to pull the names of potential jurors out. An old wooden box like there used to be used in the elections of yesteryear, with ballots stuffed inside that box. And the leader of the free world depends on who gets more votes inside that single wooden box. The service and the sacrifice of countless Americans throughout the course of the history of this country, their service and their sacrifice depends upon the integrity of counting what is in that single lonely box. Who do we trust as a people to count those votes and give us the truth? Who do we have enough confidence in that we would accept the results? Whoever it is, they just walk out and they say, this was the tally, and we accept it. Is there a single person you can imagine that would be trusted enough to walk into a room, count the votes fairly and accurately, and emerge to give us the results? And those results would be almost universally accepted. I'm not asking who you like enough. I'm asking who you trust enough. Our coins bear the phrase, "In God we trust." It is also emblazoned on the speaker's perch on the House floor, if memory serves me correctly. I could be wrong about that. I only spent 8 years on the floor of the House, and you would think that would be something I remembered. What is etched in wood where the speaker presides, I think it is "In God we trust." Regardless, it is a phrase that we have heard our entire lives. So that would be one option, except I don't think God's going to show up and count those votes for us, and I'm not sure all of us would recognize him if he did show up. We sort of have our own image of what he is supposed to look like and what he's not supposed to look like. The reality is he can be whatever he wants to be, but the reality is also he's out as an option. Who do you trust enough to count those votes? To do so fairly and competently and without regard to the outcome? Who do you trust enough that if he or she said the vote tally was 193 to 189 in favor of candidate X, you would then immediately conclude, well, that settles that. We'll see you again in 4 years and we'll try harder. Is there anyone in elected office that you trust enough to do that? Or have we as a country become so focused on winning and winning alone that the path we take to victory or defeat is of no consequence? Have we become these raging relativists where we can justify any moral shortcoming because we believe there is some higher objective? Do we tolerate lies because we think there's some higher ideal? Do we tolerate unfairness against our political opponents because the end justifies the means? There are members of the House and the Senate that I was acquainted with that would give you the truth. I know that, but my fear is we would blame the messenger if we didn't like the message and punish whoever delivered that news to us. Half the country would. But the greater fear is the fact that I trust someone that I know doesn't mean I can convince you to do so, or vice versa. So it's a double challenge. Find someone worthy of our trust and then convince an increasingly divided and skeptical citizenry that that man or woman is indeed worthy of all of our trust. What about the media? Would you believe a group of reporters that counted those votes and gave you the tally? Is there anyone in the media you would trust to do that job? There actually are some reporters and on-air personalities I would trust because they have been honest and fair in all of my interactions with them. And I have no reason in the world to question or challenge their honesty and fairness. And in fact, quite the opposite. They've always been both. But that's because I know them. And if you don't, then it would be a heavy lift for me to convince you that they're worthy of your trust. On balance, the media is nowhere near as respected as perhaps it once was. Finding neutral members of the media willing to offend both sides in pursuit of some objective truth has become almost as challenging as finding people who truly want an objective media. Even this week, we see reporters, and I'm putting that word in quotes, and these reporters have written books, and these books are designed to make money, and they figured out you can make money appealing to one side or the other. And the media increasingly not only decides how to cover newsworthy stories, but they also decide what is newsworthy. I mean, if it were truly objective, you would see the same stories on all news sites and all newspapers, but you don't. You see constant criticism on some sites and constant praise on others. So no, the media would not be that group we trusted to tell us what happened in that single box, in a single county, in a single state. Not anymore. Wait right there. We'll have more next.
Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand, from Fox News and Amazon Alexa.
How about judges? The justice system as a whole has had a rough couple of years, and that includes judges. I was fortunate back in the day to appear in front of judges that did value integrity and fairness above all else. Our friends in the media, of course, love to write which judges were put on the bench by which president. Never mind, we give judges life tenure, ostensibly to avoid politics, but the folks that write the articles these days apparently don't get that. I want you to pay attention to the next article you read about a court decision. And take note that the media can't wait to tell you which president appointed that judge or that justice. And then wait until the media complains about a hyper-politicized perception of the judiciary. Go figure. I wonder why that is. How about prosecutors? Do you trust prosecutors enough to walk out of that building having just counted the votes in that single